Israel is a Jewish supremacist state, and it wants a purely Jewish state. It doesn't want non-Jews. It doesn't even want Goyim. It doesn't, they think they're better, that they should rule the world, but only Jews, a Jewish supremacist state. If you read the explosion of sheer racial derangement in Israeli society, the glee, the joy, the euphoria they have carried on with in the extermination of the people of Gaza, just the postings on their social media, it's a genuine sight to behold. And I am not sure whether it hasn't reached or plumbed a depth well beyond Nazi Germany, even in the years of war, the peak, when the Germans started to lose the war and they blamed the whole loss on the Judeo-Bolshevik conspiracy. So you're constantly bombarded every day in Nazi Germany that our soldiers are dying, they're freezing on the Russian front, they're freezing to death on the Russian front, and all of this is because of the Judeo-Bolshevik conspiracy. And that was the only thing they heard. Remember, Germany was a totalitarian state. I suppose some people heard the BBC with what was called back then a short wave radio. Maybe some did, but probably only a handful. But I don't believe, judging from what I've seen, and the evidence is very thin because it was a totalitarian state, it was very difficult to measure what's called public opinion in those circumstances. But and you have to remember, as I'm sure you know, formally, at any rate, the Nazi genocide was kept out of public view. Now, of course, most people who wanted to know knew enough horrors were happening, because 50% of the Jews killed during World War II were not killed in the death camps. They were just lined up and shot down. So enough soldiers witnessed enough, and they heard the story, so they knew enough to know something horrible was happening. How much they knew about the gas chambers, I don't think there's any. I stopped studying it 20 years ago, and there's probably been a vast proliferation of scholarship in the subject, but I knew the literature quite well as of 20 years ago. There wasn't much knowledge in how much the Germans knew. But this is a totally different thing in Israel. This is every night on the evening talk shows. The social media is saturated with soldiers boasting in glee about the crimes they're committing in Gaza. So this country is so completely unhinged that I'm not certain they'll tolerate any Arab presence, or if they tolerate it, it will be the same way as we tolerate in our country a Black presence in the American South, namely the conditions being unlivable. And here I would want to make a distinction. You call it an apartheid regime, and it's been called by many people an apartheid regime, but there is a slight, a not trivial difference. The South Africans wanted the Black population. That was their working population. They wanted to confine them technically to Bantustans. But most of the Blacks, they may have a passport that says you belong to Transkei, Ciskei, Bofu, Botswana, and all the other Bantustans. But they didn't live in the Bantustans. They lived in encampments because they were working in South Africa, and they were wanted. Israel doesn't want them, to work there. It wants them gone. So even if you reduced the Gaza population, I still think there will be, and so the demographic problem is solved to some extent. I still think you're going to have this kind of juggernaut, this ideological juggernaut, to drive all the subhumans, the Untermenschen, the subhumans, out of all of Israel. And then you're going to have the pressures on the land. They want the land. So even if the demographic problem is solved, the land problem remains. They want the land. Dunham by Dunham, they want to take over all the land, not especially, but at a greater even degree in places like East Jerusalem, which still puts you on a collision course. So I consider the so-called Trump plan, the real horror of the plan is it will legitimize the complete ethnic cleansing of that area. And if Israel gets its way, it'll be ethnic cleansing of parts of Syria, ethnic cleansing of parts of Lebanon. These people they're completely mad. It's an unhinged society. It's a freakish society, in my opinion. When you actually read these statements coming out of that place.
Yeah, I think one of the moments that opened a lot of people's eyes was when those Israeli soldiers were caught on video gang raping helpless Palestinian detainees, many of whom had never even been charged with a crime. And you had a discourse that immediately emerged that rape of Palestinians, gang rape of Palestinians, is justifiable. You had marches in defense of those soldiers outside of where they had been detained, including by members of the Knesset, demanding they had been released on the ground they did nothing wrong. You go and have any kind of person on the street interview in Israel and you ask about the number of children who have been killed in Gaza, and they'll simply say, who cares? It's almost like a universal answer. It's a culture and a society that has become, obviously not universally, but overwhelmingly, completely inured and in denial of the humanity of everybody other than of Jews.